of my practical poetics exam studying. We're gonna see how we do with the humidity and the phone staying upright, and I'll lower my chair. Maybe. Oh, I guess it is lowered. Okay. So, to update you from yesterday, I went to the gym. It did nearly annihilate me. I only almost threw up like 3 times. I'll just hold this. But that's cardio always does that to me. And it's like F45 is a HIIT class, and so it's whenever I go to that class on like cardio days, the only thing that's going through my head is you're a machine, you're a machine, you're a machine. Which I'm not, but I only almost puked 3 times yesterday. It was really hard, but we survived. I did not read Dickinson last night, which is okay because actually I was, so I've been awake since about 6:20 this morning. I've already eaten breakfast today, so this will be an intro and then we'll get into the studying almost immediately. But I was kind of looking through all of the books that I needed to read, and I have my planner where I have like organized what I'm reading on which days and like how much I need to read each of those days. And I found out that I'm actually ahead. And so, which is great because I start feeling like with this Carson text, we're going to continue reading, I'm going to continue reading Carson today. But with the Carson text, because it's so, like, it was a cat hair, because it's so depressing and scary, I can feel myself kind of like backing away because I have to read it, right? Like, but I don't want to read it. So I'm glad that I'm ahead, and I'm going to continue pursuing about as much as I'm reading. Today I'll read about I'll read like 96 pages because a chapter ends on page 174 and I'm on page 79. So about, 95 pages. But just because I want to end on like a chapter. And then that means that I should finish the Carson book tomorrow, which is great. And then, okay, so we're going to continue reading Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. I'll also continue reading The Art of Voice by Tony Hoagland. My poetry collection today is The World Keeps Ending and the World Goes On by Franny Choi. I've read Singular Poems by Choi, but I've never read a complete collection by her, so I actually may have mispronounced them. I know that Choi is a big advocate and part of the LGBTQ community. I think she, her pronouns, but I'll look that up. I'll look that up and check it out because I don't want to mispronounce them. But I'm really excited to read this because the singular poems that I've read by Choi are just out of this world. I have my coffee. I have my water. And I think that's it. If I miss anything, I will mention it when I talk about the books. Okay? We'll go ahead and set you up in your spot over here, and we'll get going. I started just after 9. I made it to page 131. I started on 78, so that's just over 50 pages. And it's actually easier to read Carson today than it was yesterday. Not that it's any more cheerful, but basically the chapters that I've read are going over invasive species or species that humans found obnoxious or unpleasant, and they attempted to control those species through the use of basically chemical warfare, and the results that happen. So it goes over them trying to attack the Japanese beetle invasion in the Midwest. They used aldrin, which is more poisonous than DDT, these are all spray chemicals, pesticides, and insecticides. And the result was that birds died, songbirds died en masse. And then it goes over, it was really interesting to read the chapter And No Birds Sing, because it goes over, it's kind of, all of this is kind of connected, right? So Carson's main concern here is establishing how the use of these pesticides and insecticides affect the, for lack of a better word, and to use a cliche, the circle of life, right? So by spraying the ground or spraying the beetles or spraying grubs or spraying, anything, like the poisons don't have a target, right? Like they're going to eliminate everything that they touch. And then it's going to be a prolonged effect because what they're spraying is part of the food chain, right? So then when those who eat the beginning part of the food chain get eaten and then so forth and so on, then the result is like mass devastation and or extinction. She talks about a lot of species of fish that were eliminated almost entirely, if not entirely, in various areas across America, Canada, some East Asian and South Asian countries, the Philippines, England. Something that I thought was really interesting though. So I grew up in the 90s. My childhood was in the 90s. And anytime my dad would see a bald eagle, he would get really excited and be like, look, there's a bald eagle. And so I was always raised thinking that seeing those was really like a rarity. And she discusses in the 1950s, the bald eagle population across America disintegrated extensively, likely as a result of the use of these insecticides and pesticides, because the eagles, or at least the eagle that she's talking about, it was more on the eastern side, but she mentions the California side too. Its main meal and its food source was fish, right? And the fish were dying en masse because the spraying that was happening did not exclude spraying near, like those who flew over and dropped chemicals didn't turn off their spray as they passed over bodies of water. But even if they did that, then as soon as the rains came, it would wash those toxins into the waters anyway, and then fish were dying in the millions. So that would, she doesn't say that the death of, like, the decimation of the eagle population is direct, well, she like alludes to that it's directly associated with the chemical warfare that the government had unleashed to fight undesirable insects or invasive species. But it's really interesting because I was talking with two of my friends a few weeks ago, and they were like, we see eagles all the time out here. And I was like, really? Because I've seen a few golden eagles out here. Maybe one bald eagle out here. I very rarely see a bald eagle out here. But I thought that was really interesting how now we're in the second decade of the 21st century, and only now is the eagle population like considered more maybe proliferate. But I need to do the research on that to see if the species has actually made a comeback, or if we just happen to be, or like if it's actually as common as is being said. Because I just was raised knowing, like my dad, he was born in the early 50s and immigrated to America in the mid 50s. So he would have been in the United States late 50s, early 60s. And so his childhood would have, I don't know if, I'll have to ask him if he remembers this happening, because there was spraying that happened in Toledo, Ohio. That's where he lived, he didn't live in Toledo. He lived close to Columbus. And I think Toledo is southern Ohio, but I'll have to check that out to see if he remembers these sprayings and whatnot. But anyways, she like goes over how like this cycle of life is impactful not only on the evisceration of species of like birds and fish and insects, and like how all of these, like, you know, you need all of those to work together to have like a thriving ecosystem, but then also comes to the dinner plate of like humans, right? Because humans fish. And so a lot of what I'm reading about right now, it's called Rivers of Death, is about how like these fish species who are dying en masse, like a lot of those are fish that are consumed by humans. So therefore humans are also consuming like the very lethal dosages of these toxins that have been sprayed all over these areas. But that to be said, I am going to take a break, and then I will come back. I'm gonna get a snack. I'm not hungry enough to have lunch yet, but I'm probably gonna do a snack and then just kind of like unwind a little before I come back and finish my reading of Carson before I move on to Hoagland and then Troy. So we'll break there. Okay, I'm back. Admittedly, it is now 1:10. So that break lasted way longer than I intended it to. However, one of my best friends called me, so I got to talk with her for a minute. And then I got distracted because we started talking about poetry. So then I submitted some of my newer poems to a journal, because I have this goal where if writers start watching this, like newer writers or established writers really don't need this advice because they're submitting anyway, but newer writers, really the trick is to continue submitting. And so my goal for this entire year has been to submit to at least 5 journals every single month, and I have 2 chapbooks that are finished that I've been sending out to contests. So I usually try to do like 2 contests a month for the past like few months. But all that to say, I'm back. We are late to the party, but it's okay. I'm going to continue reading this until about 3. Hopefully I'm sure I'll finish this reading and then move on to the other readings that I have. It should move pretty quick. I had a really good snack. I did an apple with peanut butter. It's one of my favorite snacks. I just find it so satisfying, those 2 flavors together. And yeah, we'll get going. Carson's Silent Spring for the day. To follow up on kind of what I talked about earlier, the remaining chapters that I read talked about, one of the chapters, it's called Indiscriminately from the Sky, and it talks about how the U.S. Agricultural Department really pushed to eliminate certain species in certain areas, like it was the gypsy moth in the northeast area, so like New York area, and then the fire ants down in the south, so Alabama, Florida, those Texas, Louisiana, those areas, and how there was a giant push to spray these insecticides and pesticides from planes, which was super costly for the taxpayers. And it ended up, as like the book has gone, like killing a lot of farm animals, a lot of domestic animals, a lot of wild animals, and like it was catastrophic actually for both of those locations. And then the pests that they were trying to eradicate just came back in full force after that happened. Which cost the taxpayers even more, and then kind of dismantled the faith that people had in the U.S. Agricultural Department. And then the next chapter, it was called Beyond the Dreams of the Borgias. And so this was talking about how these pesticides and insecticides are sold without truly explaining the potential lethal happenings of poisons that are being sold to like consumers. And that's actually, I left because I have insecticides in my household, and I wanted to see what the ingredients were on that, to see if those are still like what Carson is talking about in here, if those are still sold widely. And I need to do more research because with the chemicals in the insecticides that I have are different. But after like reading this, I think I'm gonna get rid of all the insecticides in my house actually, and like look for other ways to combat pests, which I don't have that many pests anyway. I do think that the best way to combat pests is like keeping a clean house, which my house I usually clean every single week. And then the last chapter goes into the effects of these poisons on the human body, and how a lot of these toxins are stored in human fat, and when the fat is metastasized, then that's when like the poisoning happens and people get sick. And it also like ties that to like a deterioration of mental health. And so I thought that was really interesting because we live in a society that is like super anxious. And so I'm wondering if there's something that's going on like akin to what was happening in the 50s and 60s when Carson was doing all this research, but it's happening now and has been for like, I don't know, decades. And if that's related to the millennial anxiety, because I do think the millennials are like among the most highly anxious generations. But all that to say, I did talk, so the friend that I talked to earlier, she's one of my best friends in Utah. She's a botanist and a biologist. And we were talking about the eagles, and the eagles have made a complete comeback. So that is true. But that is a really interesting, I didn't know that their near extermination was a direct cause of pesticides and insecticides from corporate America, right? And then some other takeaways I took from this is like, be really cautious, I guess, of like your government, right? Because the government was fully funding this project, and yet like so many things and people suffered as a result because they pursued this project because they said it was making money. And there were way more cost-effective ways to go about taking care of undesirable pests or invasive species in the locations. So tomorrow I actually have a car appointment. I have to go get my brakes changed. So I don't know if I'll finish this book tomorrow, but I have less than 100 pages left. I think I have about 80 pages left, a little more than 80 pages left. So I am ahead, which I mentioned that earlier. I'm accidentally ahead. So these are all the other writings, which I was counting those in the initial breakdown of how many pages I need to read every day. And I flipped through them earlier, and I think there's only one section that I really want to read, which this is a part of also studying for an exam, is that you kind of have to pick and choose depending on how close you are to your exam, because it is near impossible, if not impossible, to read all the books that you need to read in preparation. For kind of like an understanding, like my list for this exam is 100 books. So that I have 7 eco-critical theory texts. I have 7 affect theory texts, which I'll get to those probably in August. I have 7 craft texts, and then I have 79 poetry collections that I need to read in preparation for this exam. But with all that to say, I am probably going to take a short break and kind of just get up and move around a little bit. But after that, I am going to start reading, I'll get back to The Art of Voice by Tony Hoagland. We're reading another 32 to 37 pages in this, so that should probably take me about like 30 minutes or so. And then I will pursue reading The World Keeps Ending and the World Goes On, which I did look up for any choice pronouns. She uses she, they pronouns. So, and with that, yep, we'll get going. The Tony Hoagland piece. You'll notice that we have a visitor. This is Hobbs. He is my tabby cat. He turns 12 on the 24th of July. But Hoagland, again, he's really fun to read. I really enjoyed reading it. I also think, so as I'm doing my readings, I'm thinking about how the texts are communicating across the theory and craft and poetic text. And one of the things that Hoagland talks about that I just read is speech register, and how poets utilize low, medium, and high methods of speech register. And I think that this is pointing to, the whole reason we're thinking about how all of these texts interact and speak across and towards each other is that we actually come up with our own questions that we have to answer, and we turn them into our committee. Our committee rewrites those questions into more questions and then gives them back to us, and that's our exam, right? And so as I'm thinking about all of these texts, I've been writing down like thoughts on exam questions I could have. And one of the things that came to me was that like maybe like considering low, middle, and high speech register in eco-poetry, and in like how the poets are utilizing those different registries, and how that communicates the necessity of environmental change to all demographics of people who are reading these poems, to, again, like emphasize the importance of what we need to be doing to save our environment. So that's pretty exciting, is that I may have just come up with my second exam question. I have another potential exam question that I wrote when I was reading the Bates book, that again I'll probably get to whenever I go over notes. But I finished reading that. It is now 3:55. I think it took me longer to read that actually than I thought it would, but Hobbs also joined me. So with that, I haven't gotten to the Choi yet, so I am going to, I think I'm going to start reading. Yeah, I'll start reading her now. I don't think I'll finish it because it usually takes me between an hour to an hour and a half to finish the poetic readings. I'm going to have to get my, I have a roller that I use for cat hair. This is why I clean every single week, is because I have a long-haired tabby cat who sheds. But if I don't finish the Choi, then I'll finish it after I go to my gym class. But, oh, are you the star of the show now, Hobbs? Yeah, he's so precious. Okay, I'm gonna have him back up in his little, he's got a window seat up here. Oh, I gotta get all the cat hair off me. But yeah, moving on. Okay, I decided to approach it differently. So, I am not going to read the Choi book today because I'm ahead. Now I'm giving excuses, but it's my series, so I can do whatever I want. Because I'm ahead on the Carson text, what I think I'm gonna do, and like tomorrow I have to take my car down to Oklahoma City, which is like an hour away. I'm gonna take the Choi text, and then I'm gonna take the book I'm reading tomorrow, which is Clifton, and I think I'm going to hammer out those two books, along with the Hoagland. And yeah, and then I'll save the rest of Carson for Thursday. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Because it is, like, it's 4. Excuse me. And I am kind of tired, and I get tired about this time, which is so funny because, like, as I said in my first video, if I don't have things finished, then I need to come back to it later that night. So I might finish it later tonight, but if that's the case, I'll let you guys know tomorrow morning. And with that, this concludes part 3 of my Poetics exam studying series, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.